if you don't drink, and was me for many years, if I came across someone who didn't drink, I'd be like, why? What's wrong with you? You know? And so for me, alcohol, it started, in my teens. It was the end of footy season, end of season footy trip that we went around, and this is my first experience of drinking alcohol. And at first, it was just all fun, like many people, like many teenagers, when we start drinking, it's a lot of fun. You're hanging out with friends, you're connecting, you're getting up to some some mischief, excuse me, and it's just fun. But for me, with OCD, and I didn't realize this until more recently, it was a way for me to slow my brain down and to feel normal and to numb everything. And so alcohol would give me the night off, basically, of thinking. And OCD is largely a thinking condition, and so I loved that, but I didn't realize I loved that until more recently. And so for years and years and years, I would drink to get drunk. It wouldn't be a good night unless I was drunk, and that could look like just me being on the couch watching footy with a 6 to 12 beers, or it could be me out at a party or going out to the pub or going to a nightclub or whatever it was growing up. It would, if there was something social, it need to be drinking always, and I'd always be worried like of running out of beer. What would happen if you ran out of beer? Because that was like my escape. So for so long I did this, so long, and I talked about when 2012 and the lead up to that. So for the 2 years in leading up to that, we'd moved from Canberra to Hobart, and I felt very lonely. I didn't want to admit it, but I felt very lonely. I struggled to connect in with local people. I had the same in Canberra as well, so I drank a lot in Canberra. And so I turned to alcohol to numb everything. But then what started to happen was I'd go to Friday night drinks after work, for example, and I'd get drunk. I'd be the life of the party, and everyone loved it. And I loved it as well. But then what would happen the next day is my brain would go, okay, Simon, you've had the night off of OCD. It's time to ramp it up. So this was my hangover. I never got hangovers like most people would experience them. I got it as rumination. And so I start ruminating about the night before, trying to piece the night before together. And the reason I do this was because OCD for me is around trying to avoid harm or discomfort to somebody else. So I do behaviors and I think in certain ways because I want to avoid conflict around harm. And so I'd piece the night together, trying to identify if I had caused harm to somebody else. And that harm being maybe I said something I shouldn't have said and it's going to cause trouble. And then also I wanted to avoid trouble myself. So I'm like, okay, did I say something or did I do something that offended someone? Because on Monday morning, I don't want to be in the manager's office getting in trouble, potentially lose my job. Again, financial trauma, lose my job, lose finances and so forth. And so I'd ruminate to the point where reality would become distorted. The night before, the Friday night drinks, I could no longer remember for what actually happened. My brain would be trying to trick me. So I might turn the drink again, trying to numb that again, numb that pain. And this would last for days and days. And then I go back to work and I realize I'm not getting in trouble. Nothing happened. But I'd do this on loop every weekend or every other weekend. This was becoming an issue. And this continued to be an issue. I never dealt with it. I thought my drinking wasn't too bad. I didn't see the issue that my wife saw. In fact, I told her that if she's got an issue, maybe she should go and speak to someone. I thought maybe I'd cut it back. I'll go for a few runs around the block and I'd only drink on certain nights and I'd only have two or three, but two or three for me is not possible, I discovered. So I started making all these rules around alcohol. But where it turned around is studying social work. So I came to social work as a mature age student in my mid-30s. So I was able to look at life and community and how culture impacts our identity. And I discovered that alcohol is a depressant. People had been saying this to me for years, but I never believed it until I read about it through my studies. So I'm like, okay, this makes sense. Don't drink if if you're prone to depression. But I still did it. I ignored the research and all that type of stuff. And so, but I started planting a seed. It started planting a seed in me going, okay, something's brewing here. But what really turned it was my kids, right? And so a couple of years ago, around the COVID times. After COVID, we start going out to the world again, and I remember it might be like a Friday night, and my son Gus would come to me and say, "Dad, it's the footy. Are you drinking tonight? Are you having a beer?" And there was nothing untoward around it. It was just like he'd seen Dad do this with the footy, so he started associating Dad with football and drinking a beer. And I said, "Yeah, I would do that." But then at the same time, something inside of me really just didn't sit well, that conversation, and I hated that conversation. But I still drank to numb everything and to disassociate. And then that continued, and then we start going out to restaurants for dinner, and again it's a social thing. So I'm the designated drinker. I would say that to my wife, and she's the designated driver, it was fine because she never drank anyway, so it kind of made sense. But I made a point of saying that. And it's interesting whenever I get in the passenger seat of the car, the kids go, "Daddy, why aren't you driving? Like, this is weird. You've got your spot in the car, and it's definitely not in the
It's
passenger seat." And by now, my daughter was asking this question as well. And so then we'd have to have a discussion with a 6 year old and a 3 year old at the time, saying, "Oh, well, Daddy's been drinking, and it's responsible not to drink and drive, and all this type of stuff." And I'm sitting in there, my heart's sinking in this conversation, going, "This is a shit conversation to have with a 6 year old and a 3 year old. What am I doing with my life?" You know. So this was happening a couple of times as well, starting to plant more seeds.